All right, well, what we want to do now is Mike and I are going to walk into the HMOTD mail vault, and which is just filled with postcards and letters from all of you out there in podcast land, and answer some of the great mail and questions that we've got. We love feedback, we love engagement, we love clicks, and we love you. And
all right, let me reach over the desk here, Rob. Pardon me, excuse me, and let me go right into that big, huge vault and grab our first postcard. Fellow babies, I hope you'll speak to the closing theme, which I only recently learned has no actual lyrics. I'm terrible at understanding lyrics, so I always thought it was something about, quote, gone to the park with my honky daughter, yeah, yeah. Have you found have you found anything in your researches on why they stuck with this demo version instead of giving it actual words? And has anything like that ever been done with any other show? Yours in Christ, Matt Grasso. Oh, that Matt Grasso.
Oh, thank you, Matt, for your question.
That question's actually from Chris Tatro, who co-hosted with us, but it's a great question. We got it from more than one listener, actually.
That's right. I think we had a couple or two or three people asking us about the closing theme, which of course we're using as our opening theme. So yeah, this is that little blast of late 70s rock and roll that comes in at the end of every episode, right before the MTM cat meows. And yeah, people have, and when I say people, I mean me, have for decades been trying to piece together the words that are being sung in that closing theme. And as Matt notes, the official story is that the theme, in fact, has no words. Hugh Wilson and Tom Chihak, one of the writers, when they were putting the pilot together, they flew out to Cincinnati in, I think it was like early spring, to shoot the opening establishing shots of Cincinnati. It's all just, it's striking to me how kind of, well, those opening shots are not, they don't bowl over anyone with their composition or anything like that. It's just a very kind of bland.
No, it's interesting because this is the same thing that the makers of the U.S. Office did. They went to Scranton and just took some shots. It must be a time-honored tradition if you set a show not in New York or L.A., you have to go to these flyover towns and do your own opening credits taping. I guess Cheers avoided that by having all the old-timey etchings and stuff.
I don't think that Cincinnati looks its best in March, but
part of that is also the videotape, as we've talked about.
Yeah. So anyway, having done that, they then went down to Atlanta to supervise the recording of the theme song. And Tom Wells did the music. We talked about this last time. The opening theme had already been written and it was all prepared, and they put it together and recorded it. And then just while they were wrapping up, the story goes that somebody said, they had all the studio musicians there, and somebody said, well, we got to have an end lick. And this is a show about rock and roll, so we got to have some rock and roll. And the story is that they just threw it together, and that the singer just improvised nonsense lyrics, which is what people did to sort of like as placeholders. Songwriters do this, Hoyt Axton, Jeremiah was a bullfrog. Apparently that's a placeholder lyric. And later he wanted to change it to Jeremiah was a prophet.
Right.
But everyone was like, no, bullfrog is better.
Wasn't Yesterday that Paul McCartney wrote, wasn't that originally Scrambled Eggs?
Scrambled Eggs,
yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
There's a song by the band called Chest Fever, and that's another case where the lyrics are just they never changed the lyrics from the strange lyrics from the original holding lyrics.
That's a Wikipedia category page waiting to happen.
That is. So the story is that they the singer just kind of started singing nonsense lyrics, and they said, oh, let's just use that and let everybody try to piece together what he's saying. But we are. This whole podcast is proof that we are not good at leaving well enough alone. And so, for years I have wondered about this theme song. And now that I have the theme song recorded in Audacity and GarageBand and all this high-tech equipment, I could not help but sit down and sort of try and do a CSI-style enhancement to figure out the lyrics and to reveal them now finally to the world.
Enhance.
Just print the damn thing.
Are you sure this is a good idea?
I'm not sure it's a good idea that I sing them. Maybe I'll just say them. But
no, I mean, this isn't gonna we're not gonna accidentally summon some ancient being slumbering underneath the Cincinnati Triangle or something with this incantation, are we?
Only one way to find out.
All right, let's do it.
All right, so here now, finally, 30 years later, I reveal to the world the actual lyrics to the WKRP closing theme. You got to picture it. Guitar starts, cut to the drums, and the singer says, "Man-tooth bartender, busting out of here." All right, Randy Mantooth, you may recall, was an actor on the 70s show Emergency, sort of a medical drama.
You're even glossing this. You've even got annotations and stuff. This is
exactly.
Great.
I got a few. So, Man-tooth bartender, busting out of here, do-do-do-do-do-do. Syl drew the morning. I don't know what that means, but Syl drew the morning, and a microphone in her heart. That's one of the clearest lines. Everybody gets that.
Poetic,
a microphone in her heart. Yeah. All that. Food and fun, and that bell in hand, do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Idyll a rude druid, and a coolada in her heart. Coolada, of course, is a frozen coffee beverage you can get at Dunkin' Donuts, right?
That wasn't invented until 2008, though, Rob. We're getting in some weird... There's druids and cooladas in this thing? I don't like this anymore.
I think it's a little hacky to rhyme microphone in her heart with coolada in her heart. But if you listen to it, that's clearly what they're saying.
Okay, all right. Well, I can accept that. And then outro and we're out.
And then meow.
Yeah. Okay. I'll buy that. Sure. I mean, I think it is kind of like this fluid poetry thing where everybody can the things that it's like a Rorschach test. Like the things that you hear in there say a lot about you as the listener.
What's that thing? Where it's kind of a paranormal thing where people listen to blank cassettes and they hear voices in them.
EVP,
you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Electronic voice phenomena. Yeah.
I saw you. Can you do that again? I saw you on the screen. I don't see you in the room with my eyes. But you can show up on the screen if you fly in front of it. Come towards me. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, these lyrics, right, I mean, to just throw that up, and the whole idea was they thought that nobody would hear it over the bumper of the local station saying, coming up at 11,
that's right.
Filth in your supermarket food. Find out which supermarkets are full of filth coming up at 11,
At 11. But you'll have to sit through weather and sports. That's right. It's designed to be spoken over, which is exactly how we've been using it, too.
Exactly.
We were not supposed to leave.
Goodbye, Jack.
We have to go back, Kate. We have to go back!
All right, our next postcard comes from Jeff Wickstrom. Not all of our postcards come from guest hosts of the show, but those guys get first. They get to be first right off the bat.
Yeah, they should.
And Jeff has a number of good questions, but the one that I want to ask right now is he just says, alternate universe in which Gary Sandy leaves WKRP after the pilot, a la the version of Lost with Michael Keaton as Jack. Go.
Let's take this in an orderly manner, okay? Let's not get too excited.
He said go.
I know. No, come on. We gotta think about this, okay? So, as we talked about in the pilot episode, sometimes pilots would introduce people who would no longer be on the show after the pilot, or they'd be recast. Given the tenor of Jeff's question, I'm going to go with the assumption that he means nobody will be replacing Gary Sandy. We'll just have no Andy, basically.
So he's not proposing a show that follows Andy wherever he goes.
No. If that, wow. Yeah, like an anthology series where he goes to like a different radio station every week. I don't know.
Down, up and down the dial.
I don't know if I could handle that. There does need to be a program director. And what I would probably do in this alternate universe is in the first couple of episodes, I would have format change went off without a hitch a couple of months ago, but Andy's gone now. And so there's competition to be the program director and to ascend to that role. Now, we could throw 3 people's hats into the ring there, Herb, Venus, and Bailey. Herb will want it because he'll want to grab power, obviously. And Bailey probably, at this point in her character development, won't want it, but will start feeling herself drawn to doing it. But the person I would give that role to, and who actually ends up being assistant program director later in the series, is Venus.
Nice.
I think with that, you get this great opportunity to put Venus and the big guy into a lot of scenes together before who is Gordon Sims, build up the trust between the two characters, and then he gets revealed as Gordon Sims like halfway through the season, and the big guy has to deal with the fact that this guy that maybe he had a little prejudice before, but it was, under the radar, and he's come to really like Venus, and all of a sudden he finds out he's a deserter. That gives a lot more impact to the big guy's reaction. And it does also allow us to dispense with the, all the stuff that we found problematic throughout the season, We've got Venus in a position of authority. He's not going to be acting the way he did to get hired as the nighttime DJ. And it's just going to give a great opportunity to give Tim Reed a lot more material and a lot more responsibility as a character on the cast.
That's nice. You could even bring back late in the season, late in the series, Andy Travis back. And now he is the heavy. He's like the hotshot programmer or whatever. Who now you're going to play that, that he represents all the, if you wanted to dump all that on him. I don't know if that's fair, but yeah.
So what would you do with an Andy-less first season of WKRP, Rob?
Well, I don't know if I have an answer to that, but the question, just the words alternate WKRP just kind of sent my mind spinning off in various directions. We've hinted at there being alternate reality WKRPs before, and so I was just thinking about what alternate WKRPs there could be. Of course, there's the original, British BBC version, Wireless Hartlepool. This was, about a pirate radio station back in the, in the early 70s.
Oh,
and then in Canada we had Radio Saskatoon, but the less said about that, the better. The WB had the show in the 1990s, Cincinnati Zoo, which was really like a black WKRP about an R&B station that went hip hop, with one of the Wayans brothers' sisters was in it, and maybe Brandy, I think. Yeah, but no, my favorite other alternate WKRP is probably the original 1940s radio serial. Which is Red Wigglers presents the Cincinnati Zanies in Buckeye Follies, and with Fred McMurray as Travis Gary and Nigel Bruce as Mr. Carlson, Frank Morgan, he was a Wizard of Oz, and of course Veronica Lake as Jennifer Marlowe.
Wow, that went in a direction I did not expect, Rob. Very well done.
Hey, did you hear the news? Ben and Chris want us to go in a conference room C for a meeting.
Let's get this over with.
Happy birthday, Ron.
Anne said you had a big party. Sombreros, karaoke.
Yeah, I did that for Anne. Why would I throw Ron Swanson an Ann Perkins party? So, I have rented Bridge on the River Kwai and the Dirty Dozen. Artie from security is outside the door, so no one will bother you. And a cab will be here whenever you're ready to take you home.
Thank you.
Do you remember what you said to me 5 years ago when Eagleton offered me that job and I asked you for your advice?
Do whatever the hell you want. What do I care?
Right, but then, after, when I pressed you, what did you say?
I believe I said that I thought we worked well together and that I might disagree with your philosophy, but I respected you. And I said that you'll get a lot of job offers in your life, but you only have one hometown.
Yes, that's how I remember it.
Well, while we're on the subject of alternate versions of WKRP, that seemed to be a pretty common thread through the rest of our listener mail questions. Let's talk about a letter from Jeff Raymond, who won our Watergate Burglar Pants contest Somebody Could Win.
Yes, very quickly. Found out that the burglars were wearing...
The burglars were wearing suits,
pants.
But the cops who arrested them were wearing dungarees.
Ah, yes,
so that was
course.
A great sort of reversal of expectations. So He starts off saying, long-time listener, first-time caller. We always love first-time callers. Get the special sound effects, you know.
Ding!
There you go, exactly. In the opinion of our esteemed hosts, what show today/recently would you say best acts as a modern version of WKRP? I've been mulling this over with how you put this together so far, and part of me thinks The Office, although possibly it's a little too zany, or maybe even Silicon Valley in terms of a setting everyone knows but few experience. So interesting stuff there.
Yeah, great question.
You know, you've joked, Rob, on this podcast about your sitcom knowledge stopping around 1999. So
it's true.
We'll see if we can dig up something from the last 15 years. But what would you say is the closest thing to WKRP on the air?
Yeah, so it's true. I don't know a lot of the most current sitcoms. I don't have cable. I have Netflix, so I've seen, the ones that are there. I've seen Kimmy Schmidt. I've seen Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I like Community. But I don't want to just list good sitcoms or sitcoms. I think Jeff suggests The Office, and that's interesting because it's a workplace sitcom. It's got a zany element. It has heart.
There's good guys and bad guys. There's
good guys and bad guys. Yeah. That's right. I think I would say that the American version of The Office, certainly in the early seasons, which is when I watched it, has the DNA of the British Office in it. Which makes it a little more caustic, a little meaner, a little more cringing, and of course the British Office has that to a much greater degree. It's a tougher show.
Yes.
And so that doesn't really feel that WKRP-y to me. In the same vein, maybe something like Parks and Rec is a little closer because Parks and Rec is just another step in that kind of evolution. It really depends, of course, on what you mean, what element of the show you're trying to recapture. Is it, it can't just be quality. That's why I say we can't just pick a show we like.
Right.
Is it format? Or they don't make as many 3-camera studio audience sitcoms today, and the ones that they do, I don't know. We associate kind of 3-camera studio audience with junk. That doesn't mean that they
Chuck
are
Lorre
junk.
Sort of family of sitcoms, right? So I have a couple of ideas on this. Sort of first things first, yeah, I mean, the workplace sitcom is kind of a dying breed. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to say the closest thing to WKRP these days is Archer.
Archer, wow.
It's a workplace sitcom. It's every single character is crazy, basically, with a few exceptions. And I could totally line up a few of the characters to their analogs in WKRP. Like Lana is Andy. You know what I mean? And, so I could go on and on like that. I'm not going to because it doesn't line up perfectly. But Archer has that same vibe to me. It's sort of it's a writer's sitcom. You know what I mean? And yes, it's animated. It's a completely different medium. But it is there. And what you were talking about with respect to Parks and Rec and Brooklyn Nine-Nine is that whole idea that Michael Schur has talked about again and again, which is that he liked sitcoms like Cheers, where people were a reluctant, sort of, could rib each other, but in the end, a loving family. As opposed to the stuff you talked about with respect to...
George Meyer says
Meyer's
just people
quote.
Putting each other down.
Exactly. Yeah. So Michael Schur is like, I want a Parks and Rec where, yes, you've got the libertarian going up against the person who believes in government, but at the end of the day, they're friends. They can still go and have a drink or have a waffle after work. And so the idea,
and that's WKRP. That seems very KRP-esque.
The members of Archer are not exactly a functional family. They definitely go on more on the line of the Arrested Development, sort of like we are only putting up with each other because we're stuck together in this situation. Again, it's maybe Arrested Development's a little too meta and a little bit too self-aware, like The Simpsons, where it's commenting on itself as a sitcom a lot more frequently. So I wouldn't put Arrested Development in that basket, but. I like Archer. I like Parks and Rec. I think those are probably the two closest ones for me right now.
Kind of a related question comes from Brandt. He writes, okay, you've been put in charge of casting for the modern day TV adaptation of WKRP in Cincinnati. The show's premise is essentially the same, except in the modern day interpretation, Andy is trying to save the station by bringing it into the 21st century with, podcasts and web streaming and Twitter and whatnot. As casting director, who do you pick as the lead actors? Assume essentially every actor in the world is available and money is no real object.
Oh my God.
Sort of dream casting question.
Again, this may be where I show my sort of non-knowledge of a lot of sort of modern day, but let's just go with it. We'll see what comes up. Do you know what the first person who came to me for Herb was?
Who?
Charlie Sheen.
Well, he's done some sitcoms. Yeah,
he's done some sitcoms, and again, like I'd have to pick which vintage of Charlie Sheen to pick to make sure he wouldn't burn out in six episodes. But I like the idea of somebody like that playing the sales manager. I don't know.
I have thoughts about a modern WKRP. I don't know if I can do the casting game because if Brant says money's no object. If you were really casting a new sitcom, of course, you'd get unknowns and you'd look for sort of,
Sure.
people who are kind of like almost unknown or, coming off their second season on Saturday Night Live or
Right.
something like that,
Yeah.
and you'd get the hot new people who we haven't seen yet. And if I just pull people out of existing sitcoms, that's harder to do, and I'm just not sort of equipped. I looked around, I found online, other people have had this conversation. I found a blog where someone was playing the dream casting game with WKRP, and I think he's just doing it purely by visuals because he's posted a bunch of pictures, which we
sure.
can do a link to.
Yeah.
But let me tell you who he has here.
Okay.
He didn't do everyone, but he has Matthew Perry as Andy.
Huh.
From Friends, which it doesn't make a lot of sense, but go look at the picture and
I see. Yeah.
and you'll see he has Kate Hudson as Jennifer. I think that's just attractive blonde as Jennifer. He has Zoe Deschanel as Bailey.
Ooh.
What do you think?
Maybe her 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, I was gonna say Ellie Kemper actually from Kimmy Schmidt and The Office would be a great Bailey.
Oh yeah. The last one on this page is Zach Galifianakis as Johnny Fever.
That I like actually. That
Not
might
bad.
work. That might work. But he would be a guy stuck in the 90s instead of a guy
Yeah.
stuck in the 60s. Like he would
Right.
play like Pixies instead of like what he's supposed to. You know what I mean? Like it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think if you were doing it, if you were trying to update the premise, like Brant says, this, you definitely, it would be easy to have the kind of, if you're trying, how would you update the premise? You might say that somehow, maybe instead of a station that is trying to go from the bottom of the barrel to climb the ratings, maybe Carlson's daughter owns the station. And then because I can't bear to have Arthur Jr. on the station.
No,
right?
no.
But
no.
yeah.
So he died on the way back to his home planet.
It is one of those stations that's like Clear Channel, one of 700 stations owned by one company, and somehow, for some reason, she breaks out of it and decides to like run it old school and brings back all these old timers. Like the old timer could even be like you bring Johnny back or something like that,
Yeah.
and he's the grizzled oldster that it all.
Now they brought him back. Not as a permanent cast member, but the new WKRP in Cincinnati definitely did have some Howard Hesseman in it, if I remember
They
correctly.
did. A bunch of them sort of, did a walkthrough on that show. I can't really speak to that.
That didn't exist. Yes, exactly.
Spin-off. Is there any word more thrilling to the human soul? Hi, I'm Troy McClure. You may remember me from such TV spin-offs as Son of Sanford and Son and After Mannix. I'm here at the Museum of TV and Television with a real treat for Simpsons fans, if any, because tonight we present the Simpsons Spin-off Showcase.
So our last question is from very close to home for me. It is from Jenny Ancorn. That's my wife, everyone. Many sitcoms had spin-off series, the classic being Frasier and Cheers. My wife likes Frasier better than Cheers. Rob and Mike, which character from WKRP would you give a spin-off show to, and what's your pitch for the series?
Great question, Jen.
Awesome
Thanks,
question.
Jenny. So I think the question of, who deserves a spin-off, the first thing that comes to mind is you think about like the ratio of the performer's talent to how well they're used on the show, right? And you want to have like the sort of person who's talented but maybe not. I think that's what makes Frasier work.
Yes.
Is that you take Kelsey Grammer is talented, and but you don't try and reproduce Cheers.
Right.
Frasier is its own thing.
Yep.
And you take a character and let you see a lot more sides to him when you pull him out of a different place. The first thing that comes to my mind, in a way has been done, because the character who fits that for me is Tim Reed and Venus. But what would a Venus spin-off show be? In a way, now I've never seen Frank's Place, but I can't help but think about Frank's Place, this great show that this beloved show, which you, as far as I know, you can't find anywhere now, made by Hugh Wilson with Tim Reed. It's about he's like a professor or something like that, but it's about a man who has been living in the North and who returns to his family in New Orleans, and he kind of feels like a fish out of water. And of course, it's just very good and smart on African American culture and race and the northern black man and the southern black man, and it's also just a beloved show. I'm talking out of my hat because I haven't seen it, but it's like, in a way, Frank's Place. I'm not saying that Frank was Venus, but in a way, Frank's Place is a kind of pseudo spin-off of WKRP.
Yeah, I was gonna use Frank's Place as my jumping off point, because of the fact we got both very, very essential parts of WKRP, Hugh Wilson and Tim Reed, working together. My feeling is, let's get Venus out of the radio station. We know he held a whole bunch of jobs, right, between going AWOL and ending up at WKRP. I have a feeling one of those jobs was teacher. I want Venus to, in 1983, leave WKRP, go back to his hometown. I think Gordon Sims was from Chicago, maybe? And teach high school. A year before The Cosby Show comes on, so we can erase that from history, and I don't have to feel bad about loving The Cosby Show anymore. So it kills two birds with one stone, and we end up with a 5 or 6 season long kind of stand and deliver inner city high school comedy drama. It's one of the first dramedies.
Nice.
And it's an hour long, but every episode's like The White Shadow. There's like a couple of students who have a plot, and then, Gordon has a plot with one of the teachers there, and sort of like you have this constantly rotating cast of characters. You keep it real time, so you have students graduate and new students come in, and you can tackle issue episodes, but you can also do funny episodes, and it just gives a lot. In the 1980s, it could have happened. It's believable that this could have been a show, because there were a lot of shows that, again, in the years after that, and Cosby debuted in 1984, so you have that niche that's ready to be filled, and I think that would be a fantastic show.
That's great. It's a nice kind of payoff for, as we said, Tim and Tom got their start in Chicago, going into high schools and telling kids about drugs and stuff, warning kids about drugs. I have one other idea. I don't know if there's such a thing as a spin-off prequel, what you call that, but the only other thing that came to mind, it's kind of more of a Silver Age sitcom. It would have worked better in like the mid-'60s, but basically it's the big guy's war. It's Mr. Carlson in the Marines back in World War II. Because I love him so much. Just like, it's kind of like the Pacific Theater's Hogan's Heroes, right? This bumbling doofus, kind of lovable and good, kind of bumbling his way through the war.
So on your recommendation, Rob, I started reading Gilligan's Wake by Tom Carson.
Nice.
And I've just gotten to the point where we're in the Pacific Theater with McHale and the skipper and JFK. So we could just slot the big guy right into that whole like comical, right, Pacific Theater. Scriptwriter, it's mid-'60s, scriptwriter Thomas Pynchon. We're all set. We'll just like, he'll write a 4-season Silver Age sitcom, and the world will be a perfect place.
Show's gonna last 3 weeks! 6 seasons and a movie!
So in addition to this idea of a spin-off from WKRP, we've talked ever since the first episode, Rob, about wanting to kind of come up with some ideas about, the whole idea now is you get 6 seasons in a movie, and that's kind of right. Like the sign of success for a sitcom. WKRP managed to get syndicated with only 80 some odd episodes, so that back then that must have been an okay syndication package. But let's say the show doesn't end at the end of season 4. Let's say it goes on for another season or 2. What are some of your sort of ideas for season 5 plot lines? So everybody is where they were at the end of season 4. All those sort of ongoing arcs are at that point, where would you go from there?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone else does this, but this is something I can't help but do, is think about, the show that we didn't get to see, the episodes, the lost episodes, the never made episodes, the never were's. And so a lot of these are just, I'm not saying these are great ideas. They appeal to me because they seem like plausible ideas, or at least to me they do. So, things that could happen. So like there's the episode where Bailey's mother comes to town and wants her to get married.
Ooh,
or
I like
the episode where Andy is secretly in a rock band, which turns out to be terrible. Everybody, the first half of the episode, like Bailey or someone like that, is figuring out that he has this secret life. There's the episode where Les misunderstands the phrase pork barrel spending and somehow accidentally breaks a real news story, a real major news story about corruption, and like all the Washington reporters and stuff are flocking to him, but he's misunderstood the whole deal. And I don't know, a B plot I thought of. I don't think this is a plot, but a B plot I thought of is that Mr. Carlson secretly has a portable TV in his office, and he gets hooked on a soap opera. And so for the whole episode, people keep hearing snatches of dialogue, of funny dialogue from through the door.
That's brilliant. There's a lot of loose time in the afternoons in the office, Rob. We don't often get very busy around here, so that fits perfectly. Yeah, I could see that happening, especially considering like in 1982, 1983, that Sony like mini TV, it was selling like. He loves like having stuff in the office to play with, so it would be
toys
perfect.
And gadgets. Yeah, he could do it. So if you'll indulge me, the one that kind of spun out at greater length, and obviously this is me returning to an episode that troubled me and that I never dug, because I have this idea for it would have to be like a 6th season, like to get it into the right time period. But I had this idea for an episode called Hoodlum Rap. So here's the setup. Steve Peavy comes back. Remember Mr. Peavy? He's the booking agent who brought Scum of the Earth. He comes back and he's got a new act that he wants to promote, and it's a rap band because it's like the early 80s.
This is like Run DMC era, like very early on.
Rap band, exactly. And everyone's like, "Oh, I don't know. Remember the last band you brought us?" And he says, "Yes, these guys are much worse." And so in some ways it mimics it, but because it's a rap band, of course, they, without thinking, they send, Venus is the guy that has to be the point man on this, right?
Instead of John.
And Venus doesn't want to because he doesn't like rap music.
Cool.
And I like the idea of like, I just think they should talk more about music on the show. I like the idea of like, so Venus likes his Quiet Storm, his R&B, and maybe he has a conversation with Johnny about, Johnny says, Johnny thinks it's about getting older. He's like, yeah, the music you like, the kids aren't going to like it forever,
I like that.
And I would love that scene. But for Venus, it's also about positive messages. He doesn't like the messages in rap music, the sort of impression, the stereotypes of young black men coming out of that. Okay, so all this is all the first act.
Wow.
Because the pivot right before the end of the first act, the commercial break at the halfway point, is when the Hoodlum Rap band or rapper shows up, and he's white because it's Adam Horovitz. And, and they're just like, and he's in his fight for your right to party phase. Sure. Sort of like, like pre ill communication ad rock, and he's a punk, and he is a punk, unlike
of course, because they were hardcore punk.
Yeah,
before they were rappers.
He's a literal punk, but he's also like a punk, like like he's annoying and irritating and destructive in a way that Michael DeBar just couldn't pull off. Like Adam Horovitz in 1984 could totally be, and he's like, he wants to scratch records, and Venus is like, if you scratch my records, I'm going to break your face.
No, that's perfect, because he sees Venus's collection of like classic 70s soul and jazz and stuff, and he's like, oh my god, we could sample the hell out of this. I have a great idea for a new album.
Exactly. And that's the resolution. So at first it's it couldn't go worse, because now it's all his issues, Venus's issues with rap, but it's also about appropriation, right? But then I would think that how they would have to like resolve it is that Venus would see that ad rock really loves this music, and they would connect and bond over their love for this sort of obscure old 70s soul music or something like that. And they would have a conversation about appropriation and love and music and culture. And Ad Rock would talk about where he came from, and and that they would resolve that and work through that, and you'd get a glimpse of the kind of the more mature Ad Rock that comes out, in the 90s sort of thing.
That's great. That's fantastic.
So that's my dream episode of W.
They can take out Adam more events. Hurricane, you got cloud. Other DJs, you put your head out. I'm bumping on the string, I'm paid to sing a rhyme. Let's do one thing, I'm in lava lamp. It's in my brain, don't tell them I'm already freaking opinion. But I rock well, the best do go. And then I bust the king go. Got more rhymes than Jamaica got mango. I got the pit lick, half the end of my stove bar.
So, Rob, when we started talking about this last year, when Chris Tatro kind of came to us with the idea that we could rip off any number of TV rewatch podcasts, I didn't really think we'd end up where we are right now. I'm really pleasantly surprised that we've gotten through a full quarter, basically, of WKRP's history. The podcast has kind of changed a little bit from what I had probably originally envisioned it as, which was a straight rewatch podcast. There's something happening, kind of bubbling under the surface of everything we've talked about so far. It's really put me in a very kind of interesting place as far as looking at this period in history is concerned. We've joked around about there being an overarching thesis to Hold My Order, Terrible Dresser, but let's see how it unfolds. Let's not call the race before it's done, but let's see how it unfolds, because I think what we're looking at here is 4 really crucial years in world and more specifically American history that this little sitcom is telling us a lot about.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things we didn't get around to today, but what was in our planning notes for this, was to talk about other shows from this period. I don't think any of them really get to this level of depth on the stuff that we kind of love about this period of history and the sort of quirkiness of that late 70s, early 80s period. I don't think of Taxi or, well, Barney Miller's a little earlier, to be honest, but Soap and other shows like that. Soap had a lot of, and Mary Hartman had a lot of, social commentary, but not as much cultural commentary, not as much pop culture in them. And I think that's one of the things that's made this podcast really live for me, is that it's a window into another time, and a time I don't remember really well.
Yeah, that's fair. I actually would say that I'm still with the Grail Marcus quote that we read in the pilot, which is that you can take just about anything if it connects with the critic, with the analyst, and that things are fractal, and the more you zoom into them, the more details you're going to see. And this is the show for us to do because it means something to us and it connects with us. Somebody else, I think, could do the same thing with Barney Miller or Taxi or Soap, and I would love to see that or to hear that and to see those things be revealed. I think that, that artifacts like this carry their time period with them, And the other thing I think that is definitely becoming the thesis of this show, of this podcast, I'm kind of self-conscious now that this is all very intellectual and probably not that hilarious, but, is that inevitably this has become a conversation about how is 2015 different from 1979, right? And 1980. And this keeps coming up in the good ways and the bad ways. Yeah. So, some progress, incomplete and halting progress, to be sure, on racial issues and gender issues, but also, our sense of a lost world, a lost kind of political economy and social capital, that we are nostalgic for now in our neoliberal hypercapitalist century.
Governor Reagan, as a matter of fact, began his political career campaigning around this nation against Medicare. Now we have an opportunity to move toward national health insurance with an emphasis on the prevention of disease, an emphasis on outpatient care, not inpatient care, an emphasis on hospital cost containment to hold down the cost of hospital care for those who are ill, an emphasis on catastrophic health insurance, so that if a family is threatened with being wiped out economically because of a very high medical bill, then the insurance would help pay for it. These are the kind of elements of a national health insurance important to the American people. Governor Reagan, again, typically is against such a proposal.
Governor, there you go again.
Absolutely, and I think that on a more micro level, that era, that crucial sort of post-Watergate, pre-Reagan sort of era where there was so much potential and so much possibility to refute the kind of politics that we see, again, in that sort of thread that runs through those Rick Perlstein books of Nixon to Reagan and that sort of silent majority Reagan Democrat kind of exploitation. And that blog entry I did prior to the I Do and Young Master Carlson episode, the fact when you were able to see kind of your own personal history intertwined with the larger history, which is not something I ever thought I would see, because I figure, I grew up middle class in a suburb in the 80s, that's how much less interesting could you get, basically. And you realize that you're part of something bigger, and that history that's happening at the big level is winding all the way down, like you say, into the individual lives of people, and that's pretty powerful.
That is the magic of history, and that's always the moment. That's often the moment at which history comes alive for people. I see that in students when they see that they are connected to this bigger story. That's also the moment at which people become politically active, not necessarily in the sense of being activists, but just they become citizens when they see that they are part of a bigger thing.
Yep.
And actually, in this period, late 70s, early 80s, is kind of U.S. historians are really diving into this period now. Actually, a lot of great new work is coming out on the 70s and 80s in kind of a delayed way. Historians usually don't come to a topic until, maybe 30 years or so after. They leave it, the journalists, they leave it to the journalists, and then gradually historians pick it up. But I do feel that like the kind of the 60s and the 60s in quotation marks, meaning 1965 and 1975 or whatever, but the 60s kind of like was such a big thing and sort of cast such a long shadow over political and historical analysis ever since, that people were kind of stuck on that for years and refighting the battles of the 60s in the pages of history books. And it's really only in the last, not even decade, in the last 5 years that people have really that historians have said, so much about where we are today, you have to look at those, the 1970s, 1980s. That's where so much of the story is. So a lot of exciting stuff is happening there right now.
So on your part, Rob, what's been your sort of big kind of realization or lesson or whatever from doing these first 12 or so episodes?
Well, all the stuff you just said, about how this became a kind of window, it became a story about the past and about our relationship with the past and our relationship maybe with our childhoods too. Absolutely. And then, and then I also want to say that, of course, the great joy of doing something like this is feedback and interaction with people who dig what you're doing. And so, like I said at the top, the generosity of people who maybe never even watched this show, listening to the podcast and finding something interesting in it and finding something funny and finding something useful is terrific. And then the fans of the show, I don't know exactly where the sweet spot is between making this about, in-depth analysis of episodes and making this about, ranging far and wide about history. And, if you have a thought, listeners, if you have thoughts on that, let us know, because we're making it up as we go along. And I like both sides of that equation. I like both sides of that coin. But, figuring that out, because, to me, we joked about it in the Turkey episode, we mentioned it in the pilot, but it really is turning out to be true that WKRP is like this key that's unlocking so many things.
Come on in, dude.
Oh, hey, man.
Hey, I appreciate you coming in on short notice to do my podcast.
Not a problem.
What's in the suitcase?
Oh, it's just stuff and accoutrement and various.
Okay. Well, you don't need anything for this. It's really casual. I recorded it on my phone. It's that easy. Real conversational. I don't have an agenda or anything, so just go with the flow.
Cool. You know, I'm not surprised that you're doing this. You know, the whole podcast thing.
What do you mean?
Well, you know, I mean, it's just a new thing to do. You know, everybody's got a podcast now. You know, it's like shock radio for hipsters, except, you know, you don't have to put all that time and energy into writing print and copy for uninspired mindlessness, you know? But, I'm sure yours is going to be awesome.
Well, thanks, Dick. Let me get my notebook and we can get started.
Right on, man.
So, I thought I would start with some... Whoa, what the fuck? Dude, what is all this shit? Who the fuck is this guy? How did he get in here?
This guy. This
guy. How the fuck did he get in this room?
This is my producer. All good podcasts have a producer.
Podcast producer?
I'm sorry. You don't mind if I take my podcast, do you?
So, we're going to be going on a tiny little hiatus. Again, not decided by the suits at CBS. This is something we're going to do to get a few more episodes recorded. So, we'll be releasing this episode in August. And we're going to be starting Season 2 of WKRP and probably releasing those episodes as the academic year starts in September. Here's the big thing that we need from you, our loyal listeners, is we are going to be releasing to iTunes the entirety of our first season and our second season episode sometime in September. So when that happens, we're going to want you to boost the signal. We're going to want you to let everybody you might know. And you know what? I'm going to tell you right now, if you're around our age, let your parents know about this podcast. So let people know about it once we start giving that signal out on our Facebook, Hold My Order Terrible Dresser, on holdmyorderterribledresser.com. We're going to be letting you know when we're going up to iTunes. In that first few weeks, we're going to want to get as many downloads and clicks and reviews as we possibly can.
Absolutely, yeah. You know, neither Mike or I love sort of shilling or pimping you to try and get you to do clicks. That's not why we're doing this. That's not what this is about. There's no advertisers. There's no sponsors. We're not getting paid for anything. Mm-hmm. But we want the show to reach as many people as possible, or at least we want it to reach everyone who could possibly get something out of it. And the way that iTunes and the other podcast aggregators work is they reward engagement. They reward clicks.
Yeah.
The way to get yourself in front of lots of people is to have lots of people come and post reviews, post clicks, download, particularly in those first few weeks when you launch on iTunes. It's almost as if for some reason Apple wants you to go to the Apple Store and spend time there. It's almost as if they've set it up in some sort of way to encourage us, to encourage you to spend time in the iTunes Store. I can't imagine, what the reasoning behind that could be, and yet it does seem to work out that way. So I apologize for the pimping and the shilling that we're going to be doing, but the nice thing is that you have a lot of leverage in those first couple of weeks. So if when we give the signal and you all do your clicking and go to the iTunes Store and post a review and post a link and tell somebody about it and download the first season episodes, a little bit goes a long, long way. It really makes a difference. Just, each one of you can make a real difference to how many people get a chance to hear this.
I put some poison in brandy.
Which glass?
I don't know. One of them.
I don't feel very good.
Well, how do you think I feel?
So you, put poison in the brandy. It's very medieval of you.
Yeah, so we'll be coming back in the fall with season two of Hold My Order Terrible Dresser and season 2 of WKRP. And, I think in season 2, the training wheels are off for both the sitcom and for us. That hopefully they've figured out what they're doing, and hopefully we've figured out what we're doing. Yeah, the season starts out strong. The season opener is For Love or Money. This is the episodes about Johnny's ex-girlfriend Buffy, which I think are terrific. I haven't watched them in 20 years, so we'll see if I still think they're terrific.
Yeah.
I remember them as terrific. I know you can't wait for the baseball episode, that's number 3 right off.
I know.
That's coming right up.
We got Carlson for president, where we got our
Carlson
great
for
logo
president.
from.
our icon, our logo comes from that. Mike Fright, God Talks to Johnny, Americanization of Ivan, which gives us our show title.
In concert episode about the Who.
The Who concert episode, very special episode, but a serious, important episode.
Season 2 is going to be fantastic, and again, I want to bring things back to you, the listeners out there. Thanks so much for being there for us. The amount of support you've given us has been tremendous. The amount of signal boosting you've already done has been awesome. We have gotten this podcast out in front of people who didn't know about us and weren't friends of ours, and that's been fantastic. So, again, thank you for doing all of that great work, and thank you for listening.
Yeah. And let me also thank, our 2 great guests this season, Chris Tatro and Jeff Wickstrom. And we hope to have them back. We have a bunch of other great guests lined up, including some that are female persons, because there are women who watch WKRP.
Oh, sure.
I'm happy to say. And so lots of good stuff coming up. And hey, and I also want to thank you, Mike. The other great thing about this podcast is that once a week or once every couple of weeks, I get to talk to you, who, it doesn't happen. We're miles apart, and this has just been a real treat and a real pleasure.
It has been, Rob. Same here, and it's been a great topic to talk about too, because again, there are a lot of hobbies and interests we could have done a podcast about, certainly. But this one manages to hit them all, doesn't it? It manages to somehow hit every single one of them.
Magic. Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back soon with more WKRP riffs and memories. If you like this well enough to listen to the whole thing, tell somebody about it. We're online now at holdmyorderterribledresser.com, which wasn't taken, and will be up soon on iTunes and the other one. Good day, and may the good news be yours.
Hold My Order, Terrible Dresser is recorded before a live studio audience.